All right, and we're live, and I've got with me here now Michelle Hall, and you've got your show, The Dirty Mother, at Fringe, right?
That's right. Yeah, the Dirty Mother is about to unleash her bombastic explosion of fecundity all over Melbourne Fringe.
That's that's pretty exciting. Now, one thing that I picked up in the description there is you talk about how this is a punk maternity is one of the key themes that you would explore in The Dirty Mother.
Mm.
What is the punk maternity aesthetic? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, punk maternity is a form or a genre, I would say. I think I invented it. I haven't heard it anywhere else. It's my way of trying to describe both the nature of maternity, childbirth, motherhood as content, but the aesthetic is very much like rests in that heritage, I guess you'd say, or that lineage of punk is in that you resist taking lessons, you resist learning the technical forms, and you do it your own way as a form of resistance. So it's like, I'm going to make this show with what I've got. It's going to be messy. It's going to be clunky. It's going to be sharp. It's going to be loud. It's going to be devastating. And in that way, it's kind of punk. It's got its own wild nature.
Yeah, I just thought it was a interesting two words to put together because I imagine that most of the time that most punks aren't really at the stage where they're even thinking about having kids.
You'd think, but then maybe if you're having a lot of sex because you're a punk, you might be pregnant or know someone that you've impregnated. Um, yeah, I mean, that's really part of the point as well, is putting together punk and maternity, because maternity has such a sanitized image in a patriarchal culture, especially like a Anglo dominant patriarchal culture. It's been so sanitized and made clinical. And actually, when I gave birth, I was like, whoa, this is extreme. This is extreme. You are splitting your body open and another human comes out of it. And it's got chaotic fluids, it's got heartbeats, it's got so much raw life. Um, and that's really how we should think of maternity. Not the only way to think of it, but that's definitely how we should think of maternity. So I try and bring a bit of like rock and roll, a bit of punk to it, because it takes huge amounts of superhuman strength to build a baby, birth a baby, and recover from that. So it's pretty full on. It's much more full on than doing a stage dive, let me tell you, because I've done both.
Yeah, and that makes a good point. It's probably one thing that people overlook is that the idea of maternity, it's got this very clean, sanitized aesthetic that you have a nice home set up, and then you get pregnant and you have a baby and you become a mother. Where the people seem to
Mm.
overlook how there's a lot of like cervix dilation that sort of is involved there to make that happen.
There's a lot of brain dilation involved. No, I mean, it's like, just imagine you are this human in this form and your body completely transforms. It completely transforms and you are animal. And, we have our culture is so dominated by stories like the Odyssey. I think that's like probably like the classic, most dominant story that underpins most of our mainstream narratives in a Western culture. And that's about a guy going off on this epic adventure, apparently. Well, I sort of was like, being in the maternity room birthing was like, that's more full on than Straight Metal Jacket. That's more full on than the Odyssey. This is like incredibly epic. This thing where it's not a game and it's not a story. Life and death are sitting right next to each other the entire time, and it can turn any way throughout the process. So you have to be brave. You have to be immense.
Yeah, that even though we've put a lot of effort into childbirth and it's much safer than it was, that it still seems like it's pretty intense to go through, and there is always that risk that things can go wrong.
Yeah, and that's what I really capture in the show, is that I was this naive sort of product of the culture I was grew up in, thinking I was going to have this lovely natural birth. and things go wrong. And when they do, you need to have people and things around you to make sure that they get right again. And not only that, is when they do go wrong, even if they become right, your baby survives and you survive, the after effect on your mental health is going to manifest somehow at some time. And there's very few support structures still for people that birth to make sure that their mental health is cared for soon after and in the years after the birth. And so that's a lot of the motivation for this show, is that I had a birth trauma that I didn't even know that those words existed until a good 7 years after the event.
And I imagine that's a big part of the problem, that it's not much help to you then, when that, especially when you're going through that immediately after the birth, and that having all these heavy feelings, wondering what's wrong with you, when it would have been good to have that support up front.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think the punk maternity aesthetic is so important, because we have so many narratives where, particularly women, but bodies that birth, femmes, the narrative goes that, yeah, there's something wrong with you and or you're sick. But actually, what about in that moment when things are going wrong, it's not necessarily your fault, and that we show a person, really trying to survive, really grappling with that situation, which is what I imagine most women and people that birth are doing. They're trying to survive and keep their baby alive. So yeah, that's again why the punk maternity aesthetic's so important, to say it's not a thing where things go wrong and we collapse. We're actually trying to keep life alive. I went off on a bit of tangent then. Sorry, I don't know what you said.
No, that's fine. But that's one thing I was thinking about. That I feel like we've been talking a lot about the themes of the show, but maybe we should dive into talking about it a bit more directly. And so, do you want to tell me exactly, what a bit more like the through line and what people would expect watching The Dirty Mother?
Yeah, expect the unexpected. It's I made this show. It's a show that I couldn't find anywhere. It's a woman telling her true story of giving birth in a state system, live on stage, but it's also it's a physical theatre, interdisciplinary work. So there's loud live guitar. I do this mad punk ritual where I smash pomegranates as a sort of, I don't know, is it a sacrifice or is it a rejection of the whole goddess narrative, the whole fertility rite. So there's a linear trajectory to it, in the sense that I start with the summer of 2009 in Oxford in the UK, the day I started to give birth, and I come back to now, but I chop it up all through with these sort of vignettes of myself appearing as enlarged, the royal in-laws, I call them. I chop it up with animations of myself imagining the baby in utero, and I chop it up with performance in the space in the center of the stage, where I physicalize certain sections of the story, and times where I come back to the mic and speak directly to the audience and narrate. So it's quite a sort of it's definitely got a rhythm, but it's also quite disjointed in some places, and that's on purpose to kind of evoke that sense of the journey from pregnancy to becoming a mother is one that's not straight. It's jagged and there are holes and it undulates.
So with that is the way the show sort of works. It's like curtain, water break, cervix dilate, and then it's go.
No, not at all. It's what it is actually I stand at the mic and I voice mask. I repeat the same words of a recording that the audience can hear, which is of me telling the story 2 years before in a pub with people drinking pints. And so I kind of try to capture this sense that the story happened in real time in 2009. I told it in 2018. I told it in 2020, and I'm telling it again now to you. And so I try and create this sort of concertina of moments, which again to me is like evoking the experience of the memory and also postnatal anxiety that it kind of echoes at different moments when you remember the story. It's also about capturing how you evolve and change over time. Back then I was like this, and now I'm like this. So it begins like that. And you see me very pedestrian in a spotlight, at a mic, talking directly to you. And then I take my clothes off and then I transform in a pool of light into a version of me when I was pregnant, which was this pregnant clown that I created as a way of like coping with the fact that I felt ridiculous. And I go into a big clowning routine. And that's when I have a massive punk ritual, fertility ritual.
Okay.
So that's sort of how it begins. And it shifts in and out of this very pedestrian kind of almost like a gig style, talking to you at a mic, and then going into these mystical, magical places, and then coming into these really sober places right in front of the audience faces where they can see me telling them the moment that my son stopped breathing.
Yeah, and I did see that from the preview that you put on YouTube. And so it really seems like as well that this isn't a knocked up style story where it starts with the conception and the birth is the end. That I imagine that's part of what you build up to, but there's also a bit of a after the birth and what it was like for you then maybe dealing with having a child and having gone through the experience of childbirth.
Mm. Yes. Yeah, that very much so. And as we're talking, I'm just thinking, what's happening in the show is, yes, there is this sort of giving birth story that underpins, but really it's a whole load of kind of shards of different aspects of that, of like how I was treated by medical staff, the expectations of family about how I should look and behave as a pregnant woman, and then as a postnatally, the kind of response of my partner to our new reality, societal general comments that are just sort of hurled at you from different directions once you become this owned by everybody else pregnant woman. And I work with the kind of the motif of the heifer, the cow, the haunted cow, actually. And so, that sort of evokes that sense of going into an industrialized birthing situation where you're so removed from being a person, you're so removed from being a wild human doing something really wild, you're industrialized in a sense, in the way that a cow is put in a farm and made to birth repeatedly, whether they want to or not. That sounds quite awful, doesn't it? But it's that's how I kind of try and capture things in that, with that linear underpinning and then these shards of other ideas and motifs crisscrossing through it.
No, don't worry. There's a hentai tag dedicated to that, so it's it's not as not many people think that's as bad as may seem, but I understand that that's much your experience, and more there. The problem is that during pregnancy, that you're the one that's pregnant, you're the one that's going through this, but there's a lot of other people telling you what to do and telling you how to act when it's your body, it's your baby, and really at the end of the day, you're the only one that can actually properly manage things.
Yeah, that's so well put, because and I guess that's, in the end, that's the essential crux of the story, is that there's a person behind all of that. There's this, and you're looking at her. It's me. I'm telling you the story direct in my words. It's not a documentary about pregnancy. It's not, a nice sanitized narrative about pregnancy. It's not a mother's group talking about pregnancy. It's one person saying, this is what actually happened to me. And I am a real person that did this thing or lived through this thing. And this is what you don't see. This is what's hidden. So I'm showing it to you now so that you know that myself and many other people go through these normalized experiences of being criticized or judged or medically neglected, abandoned, and also, as I said before, just that epic adventure of sitting with life and death right there.
Yeah, and it's sort of as you're saying with that you can only really tell the story of your own experience, and you don't want anyone to give the impression that you're talking about what childbirth is like, sort of in general. Perhaps a lot of people can relate to what you went through, and at the very least appreciate the honesty, but you're not trying to speak on behalf of of all pregnant women and everybody's experience in childbirth.
Not at all. And the hashtag is actually hashtag we were born. And that's what I love about this show and making this show is we were all born. This isn't like something that only some people go through. Other than death, this is the only other thing that we're all going to do once. We're all going to get born. So I
Yeah.
think it's definitely worthy content for making a big bombastic comedy punk maternity show about. And that's, motherhood and pregnancy and childbirth has been sort of kept in the ghetto for a very, very long time, especially if it's a so-called unclean story from maternity. So I'm about bringing that out and let's celebrate that because that's awesome because that's us. We all were born. And this show, that theme really correlates with this particular incarnation of the show because it was a live show and now it's a digitally reimagined show. So, in COVID times, myself and a team of amazing Perth artists and one artist from Melbourne, Danielle Cresp, we had to try and kind of get together and work out how to tell this highly physical, visual and music driven show on a digital platform. And so we've had this whole other rebirth, if you like, of throwing ourselves in a room with a green screen and completely experimenting with giving birth in space and me becoming the fetus spinning in my own uterus and my guitarist appearing on a planet from outer space and me having an intergalactic karaoke session with my friend from the UK to try and pull me out of my postnatal depression. So we've really gone to town with that and had fun. And I think audiences are going to be pretty excited by all the screen technology adventures.
Oh yeah, no, I saw that too. You had some proper actual gear. You had like proper DSLRs on gimbals, the green screen, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
You had dedicated interfaces to help manage your recording software. That much
Vision
better.
switch.
Yeah, much better than I just shot things on my phone and then had to use the same laptop I'm talking to you on here and to chop things up in DaVinci Resolve. So it's
it was a full exercise. I just sort of said to my collaborator Georgie Ivers, who's the digital director of the show, let's film it. Let's film it. We can't go there, but let's film it. Because we were meant to be programmed at Trades Hall and we worked really hard to get on that platform with the new COVID restrictions. There were going to be less than 50 shows and we got chosen. So I was like, let's take this opportunity. And it was quite interesting because once some other folks around Perth realised we were doing this, a lot of people stepped in to help, professional camera people with their equipment, and a tech operator, Catherine O'Donoghue, stepped in. Asha Kiani, our marketing publicity, did all the socials. People just jumped on board and wanted to be involved because we were doing something when everybody else or lots of other people couldn't or didn't want to. And so that was an incredible wave of kindness and creativity coming together. That's why I call it a rebirth, because it feels like a giant creative contraction.
Yeah, that everyone came together to help dilate that cervix, themselves. All hands, just rending it open, so that your show could crown through.
The show is crowning. There are actually some actual crowns in the show, but they're not mine. No, they are the royal in-laws who represent the empire. The empire watching over me as I birth the next generation.
And I imagine that part of that empire, and you're talking about the giving birth in the state system, that would be the NHS that ferries are now doing donuts for in the Thames.
Yeah, the poor old NHS, hey? The National Health Service, it's an incredible institution, and I value it and support universal healthcare completely. I don't value Boris Johnson and the Tory government continuing to siphon funds away from it for decades. We're getting political now, but that certainly taking away funds from that frontline service, primary care industries, certainly showed itself up in my birth experience because I was going to have to give birth on the waiting room floor. They didn't have enough beds or staff. So yeah, the old NHS, it's a really sad story. within it, lack of training as well means that there are attitudes towards people giving birth that are also so incredibly unhelpful.
Yeah, and look, I think it's fine. All art these days is quite political. Here in Australia, that arts has been merged with the Department of Transport, so that's how highly our
Yeah.
government here regards it. So,
Isn't it agriculture as well?
oh yeah,
Or
probably
something?
it's probably a very large, diverse portfolio, and arts is right at the bottom of the priorities list.
Joy. What
Yeah.
joy.
And so one thing I'm interested in as well, and we haven't quite explored it, is you're talking about your experience with the postnatal depression, postnatal trauma, and that's really like the part of the show that's about your experience after the birth. That I'd like
Mm,
to delve into that a bit deeper, because that's something that a lot of women experience, but I don't know if it's been as thoroughly explored in a lot of
mm.
mediums.
Yeah, well, I would say that I experienced a birth trauma, which is by definition sort of when there's an event or time within the birth where you or your baby, you fear you or your baby's life is at risk. And in the case of my baby, as I said, he stopped breathing. Sorry, I didn't do a content warning, but he didn't stop. He stopped breathing for 3 minutes and had to be resuscitated, and it was really touch and go. And I knew the information that I knew that after about 3 minutes, the brain starts to atrophy. So, that was where for me, the crux of the trauma really occurred. But there were also lots of medical neglect and poor treatment that also attributed to that or contributed to that. My experience really was that afterwards, I sort of dealt with everything myself. And as I said, there wasn't any information around birth trauma, so I didn't actually know that that's what I'd been through. And as such, I didn't seek treatment. I just thought that I was extremely tired. Um, and so afterwards, I mean, I think I coped pretty darn well. And I think one of the reasons is that I am strong mentally. I have a creative practice, and that was massive in helping me stay well. I had a good relationship with my baby. Um, and I walked. I didn't drive when I lived in the UK, so I walked everywhere, and the walking was really great. I also made a couple of really good friends. Um, so I found ways to keep my head above water in terms of my mental well-being. But I lived with this constant current of energy um, that had different degrees. And it was only sort of until once I moved back to Australia and I had a bit of time because my son was a bit older that I realized, maybe that wasn't so-called normal. Maybe that wasn't just tiredness and being busy. And so, yeah, when I started making this show, I looked into it and I thought, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I guess it's one of those things. Maybe because of the way that we, that maternity and childbirth is presented to us culturally, that we don't realize that it can be such a traumatic event, and you can have residual bad vibes throughout that can affect you for so long.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think, and for everybody it's different. It's like different things will exacerbate the situation. If you've got it, my baby wasn't a good sleeper and had a breathing disorder, and again, I didn't know about that wasn't diagnosed till 3 years after he was born, even though we'd seen three different pediatricians. So that was playing into it. I lost confidence in myself, so I gave up my dream job, and not having my contact with work colleagues and having that social aspect really affected me. There's quite a lot of most mothers and people that birth know this. There's a lot of social isolation. So what we've just been through with COVID isn't new to a lot of us. We already know what it's like to have to stay at home and be on your own for long, long periods of time. And that affects, as people have experienced recently, your mental health. So that can play into it. And then, I think gender is a really big problem. Even though we're in the 21st century, in many, many relationships I've observed, including my own, there are still weird reversions, if that's a word, reverting back to quite traditional assumptions around who does what and what is work and what isn't. And I had to teach myself that work, that caring for a baby is work. That is work. I don't get paid, but it's work.
Yeah, it ties
And I
into
think
that
it's right.
classic unseen labour that women quite often get grouped with. That I gave a quick skim of your Motherfesto, and
Mm,
it related back a lot to I read Annabelle Crabb's The Wife Drought a little while ago, and a lot
yeah,
of crossover there. You know, the whole crux of that novel is meant to be, well, it's not a novel. That book is meant to be about how that even women need wives to help them with the more the domestic
yeah,
side of things, because even when a man and a woman live together, the woman still takes care of more of the domestic duties, even in the cases that say she works full time and the man doesn't. And yeah, it's still perhaps some of that
mm,
that gendered expectation that more of those domestic duties of cleaning up, taking care of kids, and all that falls to the women. But at the end of the day, that's still labour, even if it doesn't immediately tie back to a bank account.
absolutely. And if you'd read the Manifesto, you would see the reference to the statistics from the Household Income and Labour Division report from 2019, which showed that something like mothers or people that identify as mothers do something like 7 hours a week more childcare and 4 hours a week or something more domestic labour. Um, yeah, it's still a really big problem, and I think it's a big problem in not seeing domestic labour and childcare as work, and B in the assumptions that a lot of us have burned into our brain about who should do what and guilt around things like that. So there's this issue of the mother having to keep the peace, and
Yeah, and
caretake
sometimes
the emotional.
there can even be a reluctance to let that go because of those societal expectations.
There can be, and there can also just be a terribly general incompetence in a lot of men who are from what I call the sandwich generation, born and brought up in the 20th, but living in the 21st
Mm.
century. There's and it's definitely hashtag not all men, but is that the right hashtag? That's not a men's right hashtag, is it?
It
God, I hope I didn't just say
it
that.
probably is, but I understand the sentiment.
But yeah, there exists in our society, in our culture, still, I think, a lot of unspoken and unaddressed issues around sharing the caring and the labor, and the arguing that goes on in a lot of families that I've observed. If women do stand up, or people that identify as mothers stand up and say, hey, come on, let's look at this, let's break it down and let's start sharing it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's one of those big things where there needs to be that balance both ways. That that we need to have men pick up on the work a lot more. We also need to change cultural expectations. Part of the problem is even when things like paternity leave are rolled out and mandated a lot more, that men still feel reluctant to take it and don't contribute as much. So that as much as we need to really just remove the gendered expectations on people overall to really help with those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think shift out of the heteronormative kind of fixed narrative as well.
Mm.
Um, Change the way we speak about people, recognize that we have different choices and lives. But it's fortuitous to us to work together and to let go of old baggage from the 20th century
Yeah, the idea is
around the
like
family and the roles.
that you both agreed to have a kid, that you've both got to look after it.
Yeah.
So
And people that birth need support. It's a
yeah,
big deal, and you've got to you got to recover, and you need help for that. There's no way around it. You need help.
yeah, and that's sort of almost like the biggest thing that, especially for men, that the woman gave birth. You just really sat there and watched for the 9 months, and then for the birthing itself. That you can pick up and take care of a couple of things, once the baby's arrived to begin with.
Yeah, you don't just get to sit there and eat sandwiches and drink tea.
Yeah. All right.
Not that people do that. I'm joking, but yes, yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Now, I just want to be mindful of time because I understand that
Mm,
you've got your first show starting soon, and you want to be available in the pre-chat there. I just wanted
yeah.
to quickly ask you and talk about that. You mentioned how there's some guitar in this, and that from what I've read, that the show actually opens with a bit of a guitar solo from your guitarist. That you can probably see in the background there. I play a bit of guitar myself.
Nice.
And it looks like that your guitarist is running a Black Star amp into an orange cab. That I got to say, that's a pretty good combo. That if you check out my show as well, you'll see a similar arrangement. And
Yeah,
I saw as well that on your page for the Dirty Mother that you shared a song by Hole. So I imagine that when you talk about punk, that you grew up more in like the that grunge era.
Yeah, aspects of my growing up was in the grunge year. Yeah, definitely very influenced by L7, Hole, the Breeders. But I suppose, like, I've always listened to music that was older than me as well. So I always really liked the punk vibe from the 70s and the early 80s. And then when I lived in the UK, I got really into that because I was like, oh, now I understand what it's about. I understand who was here and what it was about and what it was railing against. And in terms of, Sissy Guitar Demon or Sissy Sang, they are the guitarist in The Dirty Mother, and they are a wonderful guitarist and musician and also a sound artist.
Oh, okay.
And you can find them. Well, I'll put the links up on the event page because I can never say the name of their sound artist alias. It's something like Samara Bram. But sorry, Sissy, if I've got it wrong. I'll put the links up so people can find her. But they are really wonderful.
They've got a good taste in gear at the very least.
Sorry?
They've got a good taste in gear at the very least.
Absolutely. If you like live guitar, definitely check out the show because Sissy absolutely rocks it and flies in on a planet.
Yeah, and that's I imagine, I'm hoping that with the green screen, that as impressive as that is, it still has a bit of that home movie look where it's very much two images composited together, and when they're moving, that you can tell they're just standing in the one spot, and it's the background that's giving that perception of motion.
I mean, the DIY vibe and the whole expose vibe is completely there. We want to show the mechanics of the show. So you see the green screen. We tried to work cleverly with transitions so that the audience doesn't get too jilted when they see me walk from a spotlit place on a stage to a green screen reality. So we've sort of carefully introduced that language in the first part of the show. But we decided, Georgie Ivers and myself, we decided that we weren't going to try and smooth things over because that's just not the aesthetic of punk maternity. So let's show the bare bones of the mechanics of the different technologies and things we're using.
And the great thing with something like transitions is, pretty much every video editing program these days can do those Star Wars style like circle wipes. So,
we haven't got a circle wipe. I wish we did.
Oh, God, you're missing out. Those circle wipes, like they're a bit pastiche now, but you see those back in A New Hope, and you're like, yep, that's why Lucas was such a filmmaking genius.
Love it. I'm going to investigate that. We do have a bit of handycam work, a 2010 handycam thing going on, so that's quite fun. And there's also obviously me spinning. Can't remember the name of it. What is it called? That thing, the spinny thing.
Oh, like like the more Rotary Style.
The Rotary Style. We should put the camera on the rotary thing. You said it before.
Yeah, like reel to reel.
No, where she's able to, where Georgie was able to film me, so that it looks like I'm spinning in utero.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that always just depends. Like if you use the green screen, you could quite literally be in the one spot, and then it's all about just rotating that image in the video software, or it'd be almost like just a giant lazy Susan. You film it from above, have someone spin it, build the momentum up, and then they run away, and you hit record. Yeah,
that's something we did do. There's lots of fun with the camera, lots of fun with the technology, but the aesthetic is definitely, look at us play with this.
Yeah, no, that's always a good fun effect. So, all right, well, how about, Michelle? We can wrap it up now because I understand that the first show is about to start, and you need to jump into that pre-show chat.
I do. Thanks
So-
for having me. It's been really nice chatting with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And so that's the Dirty Mother. It's starting now, and it's playing for the next couple of days, isn't it?
21st to the 29th of November, 5 p.m. Sunday shows, 7:30 p.m. Monday to Saturday.
So yeah, it's on now, and people have got over a week to check it out. So I've got the links and everything in the description for this video that they can get it right from there.
Excellent.
All right.
Lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. And I will end the stream and talk to you later.
Cheers. Thanks, Tom.